The galaxy was full of countless planets, but only a few were known as death worlds, places so dangerous that even the strongest species avoided them. These were worlds that broke civilizations. They had endless storms that could tear ships apart, jungles filled with living traps and oceans that burned anything that touched them. Yet there was one species that ruled these deadly worlds with pride and power, the Carthul Dominion. They were feared by every other race in the galaxy. Their bodies were covered in thick armor like skin, their strength unmatched and their endurance legendary. They were born in pain, raised in battle, and lived for war. For centuries, they stood as the ultimate survivors. No world was too harsh for them, and no creature could challenge their reign. To the rest of the galaxy, they were gods of survival, unstoppable and unbreakable. The Carthul conquered every death world they could find. They built empires in toxic atmospheres, thrived under burning suns, and mined riches from frozen wastelands. To them, war was not a burden, it was proof of superiority. Other races learned to stay away or submit. The Carthul believed they had mastered every challenge the galaxy could offer. There was nothing left that could surprise them. But they were wrong. Far on the edge of the galaxy, beyond the last of the known systems, there was a small blue planet. It looked peaceful, harmless even, covered mostly in water with thin air and fragile life. The Carthul didn't see it as a threat. In fact, they ignored it completely. They called it a soft world, unworthy of their notice. Yet one day, their long-range scanners picked up something strange. From that little blue world, small metal ships were rising into space, machines built by a new species. These ships weren't fleeing from disaster or chasing trade. They were exploring, spreading, reaching for the stars. That was the first time the Carthul heard the name of this species: humans. At first, they didn't take them seriously. The Carthul saw the humans' thin bodies, their lack of natural weapons, and their dependence on tools. To them, humans looked weak, just another fragile race playing with fire. The Carthul laughed. "They come from a death world?" They mocked. Impossible. They wouldn't last a single day on Vraktor or Kar Prime. To the mighty Dominion, Earth was a joke, a soft paradise, not a death world. But what they didn't understand was that Earth was far deadlier than it seemed. It had shaped humanity in silence. It had given them storms, droughts, quakes, predators, and diseases. Humans had survived all of it, not by strength of body, but by strength of mind. They had learned to adapt, to fight smarter, to build what they lacked. They didn't grow armor. They forged it. They didn't have claws. They made weapons. They didn't wait for the galaxy to find them. They reached out themselves. When the Carthul finally realized what humans truly were, it was already too late. The humans had begun to explore deeper into space, claiming planets the Dominion once ruled. The Carthul laughed again, but this time it was nervous. The humans were expanding faster than any species had before. They built colonies on frozen moons, toxic planets, and burning deserts. They were not avoiding the harsh worlds. They were seeking them. Part 1 sets the stage for what is to come. The mighty Carthul believed they were the only true Deathworlders, the undisputed rulers of survival. But when they saw humanity rise, something inside them shifted. They didn't know it yet, but their reign was ending. The galaxy was about to learn that the small blue planet they ignored was home to the fiercest survivors of all, the humans. And the Carthul's laughter would soon turn into fear. The second part of the story begins with the first real meeting between humans and the Carthul Dominion, and it happens not with peace, but with war. The location is the mining colony on the storm world of Vraktor, a planet that never stops roaring with thunder and flashing with red lightning. The Carthul had built their mines deep into the crust of that world, using it as one of their many fortresses across the galaxy. When human ships suddenly appeared in orbit, the Carthul expected them to act weak, maybe ask for trade or mercy. They didn't think these fragile-looking beings could ever be a threat. But the humans had come for something far different. They came ready for battle. The human fleet was led by the ISS Resolute, a strong gray warship with its hull scarred by old fights and its engines burning blue. On the bridge stood Commander Elena Ward, calm and sharp-eyed as the lightning storms reflected off her face. She wasn't there to make peace. She was there to defend human honor. When the Carthul fleet hailed them, mocking their small ships and fragile bodies, she gave only one order: open comms. Let's see if they bleed like we do. That was her way of saying she was ready to show the Carthul what humans were made of. The Carthul struck first. Their plasma cannon sent burning beams of green light across the void, slamming into the human shields. Whole decks on human destroyers melted under the power of their weapons. But something strange happened. The humans didn't run. They didn't surrender. They fought back. They adapted faster than anyone had ever seen. Human engineers rerouted power systems in seconds. Pilots used asteroids as shields, and gunners switched to kinetic rounds that tore through Carthul armor like paper. It wasn't organized in the usual way of the Dominion's battles. It was wild, fast, unpredictable. Humans fought with creativity, something the Carthul didn't understand. They fought like survivors who had spent thousands of years learning how to win when everything was against them. Their ships twisted through debris, their fighters dove straight into enemy fire, and their commanders made split-second decisions that turned chaos into opportunity. When the battle ended, the sky over Vraktor was filled with burning metal. 2 human ships had been lost, but the Carthul flagship was gone, torn apart in a final explosion that echoed across space. Before the explosion, the Carthul commander shouted in disbelief, "Who are these creatures?" His last words were swallowed by the fire that consumed his ship. On the human comms, through the crackle of static, came the chilling voice of a human pilot. Humans. And we're just getting started. That single moment became a legend across human space. This part of the story shows the start of the First Contact War, a fight that neither side had planned, but one that changed the course of the galaxy forever. The Carthul realized for the first time that they were not the only ones who could survive impossible worlds. They met a species that came from a planet just as dangerous as any death world. Humans were not built for comfort or safety. They were built to adapt, to fight, and to overcome. For humanity, that first battle proved something too. They learned that the Carthul were not gods. They could bleed, they could die, and they could lose. Commander Elena Ward's courage became the spark that lit the fire of human resistance. The war that followed would be long, full of suffering and loss, but also full of hope. Humanity had taken its first step into a much larger galaxy, and already the strongest species in existence had begun to fear them. The Deathworlders had met their match. The war between humans and the Carthul grew fiercer with every passing day, spreading across the stars like a fire that refused to die. After the first shocking defeat at Vraktor, the Carthul Dominion launched massive counterattacks, determined to crush the humans once and for all. Their fleets darkened the skies of human colonies. Their armies marched across planets with unstoppable force, and their war machines shattered entire cities. Humanity was pushed to its limits, facing an enemy that had conquered for centuries. But instead of breaking, humans grew stronger. They learned from every battle, every loss, and every mistake. They turned fear into strategy, pain into purpose, and chaos into strength. In the midst of this long and bloody conflict stood Captain Raj Patel, commander of the 7th Human Fleet. He was a calm but fearless leader, known for turning hopeless fights into victories. His famous words echoed through every human ship. "They have claws. We have fire." It became the motto of human resistance. The humans didn't have the biological strength of the Carthul, but they had something more powerful: their intelligence, creativity, and will to survive. Every battle was brutal and full of loss. The Carthul armies were stronger, their ships larger, and their weapons deadlier. Yet humanity refused to give up. When their fleets were destroyed, they built new ones from the wrecks. When they ran out of weapons, they made more from whatever they could find. Engineers turned mining rigs into giant war machines and cargo ships into missile carriers. Even civilian scientists joined the fight, designing weapons that could turn storms into shields and sunlight into lasers. The human race became one giant army of survivors. One of the fiercest battles took place on the volcanic planet Carthon, a world covered in lava flows and firestorms. The Carthul had taken control of it, building a fortress that they believed was unbreakable. When human forces landed, the ground itself burned beneath their boots. The air was toxic and the heat melted metal. Yet the human soldiers didn't stop. Dressed in heavy exosuits and powered armor, they fought day and night without rest. For 12 endless days, they battled through molten rivers and ash clouds. When their ammunition ran out, they used their blades. When their blades broke, they used their fists. The Carthul commanders watching the battle from orbit were stunned. They couldn't understand how humans could survive such conditions. To the Carthul, war was about strength, but to humans, war was about endurance. They didn't fight for glory or conquest. They fought to protect each other, to stand their ground, and to prove that they would never kneel. By the end of the 12th day, the Carthul fortress fell, and human banners rose over Carthan's burning horizon. The galaxy began to whisper stories about humanity, the fragile species that refused to die. Other races who had once feared the Carthul now started to see hope in the humans. They saw a species that turned disaster into opportunity, that could adapt to any environment, and that fought with hearts stronger than armor. The Carthul themselves began to feel something they had never felt before: fear. For the first time in history, they faced enemies who fought harder when they were cornered, who smiled even in pain, and who never surrendered. By the end of this stage of the war, the Carthul realized that the humans were not ordinary beings from a peaceful world. They were true Deathworlders, shaped by a planet that had tested them in every way. Part 3 shows that while the Carthul had ruled the galaxy through domination, humanity was about to rule it through resilience. The humans were not just surviving anymore, they were winning. The war had raged for years and both sides were bleeding. The humans had proved their strength in countless battles, but the Carthul dominion was far from defeated. After their losses on many fronts, the Carthul changed their strategy. They stopped underestimating humanity and decided to crush them completely. They released new weapons of destruction, biological horrors that melted flesh and metal, and planet burners that could turn oceans into glass. Entire human colonies disappeared under firestorms, and even the strongest soldiers began to lose hope. The once bright stars of human space grew dim as the Dominion's shadow spread. Yet even in the face of complete annihilation, humanity refused to surrender. The last human stronghold stood at the Omega Gate, a massive wormhole station at the edge of human-controlled space. It was the final defense line before Earth itself. The Carthul fleet gathered in unimaginable numbers, ready to destroy the last of humanity's resistance. At the center of the defense stood Commander Elena Ward aboard her ship, the ISS Resolute. She had survived every major battle of the war, and her name had become a symbol of courage. As her ship floated in the cold silence before the battle, she looked at the stars and knew that this would be her last stand. The humans at Omega Gate had little left. Their ships were scarred and half-broken, their weapons running on recycled energy, and their numbers were a fraction of the enemy's. But they had something the Carthul would never understand: the will to fight even when all hope was gone. The human engineers patched together wrecked ships, the pilots volunteered for suicide missions, and the soldiers swore to hold the line no matter the cost. Every man and woman knew that if Omega Gate fell, Earth would be next. When the Carthul fleet arrived, the sky turned into a storm of fire. Their warships unleashed plasma waves that split through human lines, burning everything in their path. The Resolute shook under the impact. Alarms screamed and entire decks were torn apart. But Elena stood firm, giving orders with calm precision. She commanded her ships not to retreat, but to draw the enemy closer to the wormhole that pulsed behind them like a living storm. The Carthul thought the humans were trapped. They advanced with pride, thinking victory was certain. But Elena had a plan that no one expected. The wormhole at Omega Gate was unstable, unpredictable, and deadly. Using it was considered suicide, but she saw in it one final weapon. As the Carthul ships closed in, human ships deployed hundreds of fusion mines around the wormhole's event horizon. Then when the enemy fleet was at the perfect distance, she gave the final order: detonate all mines. The explosion that followed was beyond imagination. The wormhole twisted violently, collapsing space around it and creating a blinding storm of light and gravity. The blast swallowed both fleets, the human defenders and the Carthul invaders alike. Ships were torn apart, whole planets shook from the energy surge, and the Omega Gate vanished in a burst of white fire. Elena's voice echoed through the last surviving transmissions: for Earth. Then silence filled the galaxy. Part 4 ends in tragedy and heroism. The humans had sacrificed everything to stop the Carthul. To the galaxy, it seemed as though the entire human fleet had been wiped out. But they had succeeded in halting the Dominion's advance. The Omega Gate's destruction saved Earth and gave humanity one last chance to survive. The Carthul lost thousands of ships and their pride along with them. They had won many wars before, but never against a species willing to burn themselves to protect their home. This moment marked a turning point in the war, a moment when the galaxy realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not strength or technology, but their unbreakable spirit. Months had passed since the destruction of the Omega Gate, and the galaxy had fallen silent. Both the humans and the Carthul were thought to be gone, swallowed by the massive explosion that had ripped space apart. Many believed the war was finally over. The Carthul Dominion began to rebuild, thinking humanity had been erased from existence. But far away in the wreckage of the broken wormhole, something stirred. From the glowing dust and drifting metal, a group of ships emerged, damaged, scorched, and nearly destroyed, yet still alive. They were human. Among them was the ISS Resolute, still flying under the command of Commander Elena Ward. The wormhole had not killed them. It had thrown them across the galaxy, deep into the very heart of Carthul space. The humans were stranded behind enemy lines far from Earth and any hope of rescue. Their ships were running low on supplies, their engines barely functioning, and their wounded soldiers needed help. But instead of surrendering, Elena made a decision that would change the course of the war forever. She gathered her crew and said, "We're not going home, not yet. We finish what we started." Her words reignited the fire in every survivor's heart. They realized that fate had given them a chance not to run, but to strike at the enemy from within. The Resolute and its surviving fleet began a new kind of war, a shadow war. They hid in asteroid fields, hijacked Carthul supply convoys, and turned the enemy's own weapons against them. Every attack they made was fast and brutal, leaving nothing behind but wreckage. The Carthul, proud and arrogant, had never faced this kind of warfare. They were used to open battles, not ghosts striking from the dark. Slowly, the mighty Dominion began to crack. The humans adapted to life behind enemy lines. They raided Carthul outposts for food, fuel, and weapons. They repurposed alien technology, learning to use it faster than the Carthul themselves. Elena's fleet became a legend, whispered about even among Carthul's soldiers. They called them the Shadows of the Gate. Rumors spread that the ghosts of humans had returned from the explosion to take revenge. But they were not ghosts, they were survivors. Real, determined, and unstoppable. As the raids continued, other species who had suffered under Carthul rule began to notice. Secretly, they started helping the humans, providing intelligence, hiding places, and support. The spark of rebellion began to spread across the Dominion. Planets that had been slaves for centuries rose up, inspired by the humans' defiance. One by one, the worlds of the Carthul started to fall. Their leaders grew desperate, their once proud armies scattered, and their empire began to crumble. The final blow came when the Resolute and its fleet reached Carthul Prime, the capital world of the Dominion. It was a planet covered in black mountains, glowing cities, and endless war factories. The humans didn't come to negotiate, they came to end it. With stolen ships and captured weapons, they launched a full-scale attack. The sky burned with explosions as human missiles rained down on the capital. Elena Ward led the assault herself, her ship charging straight into the heart of the enemy defenses. The Carthul fought fiercely, but nothing could stop the humans now. They had endured too much, lost too many, and come too far. As the Carthul command tower fell, one human soldier spoke into the comms with quiet fury. "You wanted to meet Deathworlders, congratulations, you found them." Those words spread across the galaxy, marking the moment the mighty Carthul Dominion finally fell. Part 5 shows the rise of humanity from near extinction to vengeance. It reveals their ability to turn loss into strength, despair into hope, and survival into victory. They didn't just defeat the Carthul with power, they broke them with determination, courage, and unending will. Humanity had become what the Carthul once claimed to be, the true masters of the harshest worlds. When the war finally ended, the galaxy was silent again, but this time it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of awe. The mighty Carthul Dominion, which had ruled the harshest worlds for thousands of years, was gone. Their cities were ruins, their fleets were ashes drifting through space, and their proud banners lay torn in the dust. The humans had done what no species had ever dared to dream. They had defeated the rulers of the Deathworlds. But humanity's victory did not bring arrogance or cruelty. Instead of building an empire of domination, they began rebuilding what the war had destroyed. The survivors of the Resolute and the human fleets worked side by side with freed alien species, repairing broken worlds and restoring life to places that had known only war. The galaxy, once filled with fear of the Carthul, now looked to humanity for hope. Commander Elena Ward became a symbol of what humans stood for, not conquest, but courage and compassion. Under her guidance, humans reached out to those who had suffered under the Dominion. They helped rebuild cities, shared food, and treated the wounded, even those who had once fought against them. On the burned world of Carthul Prime, where the war had reached its darkest point, human engineers planted the first tree to grow there in centuries. It became a living symbol of renewal, showing that humanity could bring life even where everything seemed dead. The once feared Carthul who had survived the war were not enslaved or executed. They were given a choice to rebuild or to leave. Many chose to stay, humbled by the mercy of the very species they had once tried to destroy. As peace slowly returned, the galaxy began to change. Species that had hidden for ages came out of the shadows to join the new order that humanity had helped create. The humans didn't rule over others. They worked beside them. They taught other races how to survive harsh worlds, how to adapt instead of fear. Their technology spread across the stars, but more importantly, their spirit spread too. People began to say that humans were not just from Earth. They were from everywhere, because no matter where they went, they made it home. A great monument was built on the ruins of Carthul Prime, standing high above the rebuilt capital. It was carved from the metal remains of both human and Carthul ships, a mixture of their pasts melted together. On it were words written in every known galactic language. They ruled the galaxy's harshest worlds, until humanity showed up. The line wasn't meant as mockery, but as a reminder of what humanity had achieved, of what courage and unity could do even in the face of impossible odds. Beneath that inscription, someone had carved 3 simple words by hand. Never underestimate us. The legend of humanity spread across the stars. In distant systems, alien children grew up hearing stories about the small, fragile-looking beings who fought monsters and won. The humans became known as the protectors of the weak and the builders of the new age. Even those who had once doubted their strength began to see them differently. They realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or their guns. It was their heart, their ability to care, to rise after falling, and to fight for something bigger than themselves. Part 6 closes the story with hope and reflection. It shows that humanity's greatest victory was not in destroying their enemies, but in proving that compassion and resilience could rebuild a broken galaxy. They had walked through fire and came out stronger. The Deathworlders who once ruled through fear had fallen, and in their place stood a new kind of ruler, not of power, but of purpose. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not as conquerors but as survivors, dreamers, and guardians of life.